Why are you here? Why did you bother to take the time out of your day to be part of this movement maker virtual experience? Some of you may be live in Delaware right now. I happen to be at my home in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. But why are you here? It's a really important question. Probably because somebody invited you. There's probably more to it than that. Hopefully there is. But you really need to think about, why are you here today? What brought you here? And maybe you need to ask the question, are you broken? I would guesstimate that all of us have been broken at some point in our lives. Are you broken right now? Are you trying to get out of a broken experience? There's an author by the name of Matthew Kelly, who I've come to read a lot recently. He is a writer for Dynamic Catholic. Actually, he owns and operates, he's the president and CEO and all those things of Dynamic Catholic. And he wrote a book called Life is Messy. And it is, right? Especially if you're broken. Life can be particularly messy. In the book, he talks about this Japanese art form called kintsugi. I think I pronounced that right, not exactly sure. But basically, when a vase or something like that breaks in the United States or a plate, we typically throw it out. In this Japanese art form, they put it back together. And they actually put it back together better than they found it. So I'm wondering, can we put people back together again better than we found them? That's the question that Matthew Kelly asks. What the Japanese do is they put gold dust into the glue, and they end up with some incredible looking plates, vases, and they actually are more valuable than before they were broken. Interesting thing about this photo is I was speaking at one of Melissa Hergert's events. Melissa is also part of the UnleashU Now family. And the next morning after I spoke and I talked about this book, I actually gave the book out. Meg Thompson said, "Hey, Todd, look what's on the wall." And I'm kind of looking around like, and these plates are up there. So how fortuitous that happened. And of course, that's been part of the message I like to share, because we've all been broken, but we can all be put back together better than we were before. Another question, do you like conflict? Most people would say no. I would be one that probably would want to avoid conflict, particularly with my personality style. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Here's a conflict if you're in the workplace, right? People fighting, arguing. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about conflict in here, because there is such a thing as called constructive conflict, but it takes a lot of work to get there. It takes communication. It takes trust amongst coworkers before you can really have that constructive conflict and move ahead as an organization, or move ahead as a person for that matter. So in the workplace, in our lives, there are silos, right? We see a lot of these in the state of Wisconsin. There are old silos, sometimes of new buildings built. There have been several of them put up in our community recently. And people think that'll get rid of the drama and the barriers in the workplace because they've got new silos. Well, silos are silos, and it takes work to get rid of them. There's also drama in our workplace. There's drama in our lives. I can't think of too many workplaces that I've worked with where there isn't drama, or in your family or with your friends. And some people think, well, Zoom now, you know, that the virtual world, the virtual work world, Zoom will get rid of all that drama. I think it's made worse. That's what I've seen. Those are the statistics that I've seen, that it's actually made things worse because there isn't that face-to-face communication. It's still a good tool. And obviously I'm on a virtual page right now. I'm on a virtual Zoom meeting, so I like the tool, but how are you using it? And of course we have barriers. In the workplace, we have walls that sometimes get in our way. We have other barriers like social media and all the communication, all the noise that's going on around us is another form of a barrier. So how do we fight through these silos, drama and barrier? We know change and uncertainty is out there, right? We've experienced that in magnitudes that we never thought possible over the last couple of years. And just when things were getting better, we hear all about inflation, and we hear about what else do we hear about? The politics, the political scene coming up, right? The elections that are coming up, inflation, gas prices, all those different things. There's always going to be change, and uncertainty in our lives. So we have to deal with that. We have to get past that. Now, some of you may not care for Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. He's on Shark Tank. He's quite the entrepreneur, done very well for himself. Some people don't like him just because he's been successful, which I think is really sad, more of a jealousy thing. But I like what he says here, right? A lot of people took advantage in a good way of the pandemic and created opportunities for themselves. Think of the UnleashU Now team, how they had to pivot. They were relying greatly on live events and they pivoted quickly, and now they're pivoting back. So they're ready, right? They see change and opportunity change and uncertainty as an opportunity for that growth. So I'm on a mission to revolutionize corporate culture and leadership. That's what I like to do. Now, that also has an impact on entrepreneurs like yourselves. Many of you are not entrepreneurs on a full-time basis yet. So what I'm going to share with you can help in that arena too. But corporate culture and leadership are so critically important. And I love this quote here. The CFO, of course, is very concerned about the bottom line, but the CEO is more concerned about his or her people, right? We have to develop our people. If they leave, they leave. Then we're not doing a good job developing them. But we have to do something to retain our employees. We have to do something to engage our employees in the workplace. That's what movements are all about. That's what being an entrepreneur in the workplace, much like an entrepreneur outside of the workplace, is all about. So we have all this anxiety, all this stress, depression going on in our lives in the workplace. And some organizations think, oh, we'll send Billy or Susie to a leadership event and they'll come back and they'll change our organization. Well, if only it was that simple, right? Leadership, change, culture, mindset, all those things are processes that we have to continually work on. And that's part of why you're here. That's part of why you're on these calls, why you're on these presentations, because you have a passion for personal growth, a passion for leadership. And if you're in the workplace, a passion for changing your workplace. So I developed this 5-step roadmap. Now, we're not going to have time to get through all 5 of these, but I do want to focus today on that one highlighted in yellow. And it's really about differences make us better. Talks about the 5 people who are close to us. But this is what my mantra is when you talk about all the different acronyms: DEI, LGBTQ plus question mark, BIPOC. It really boils down to something as simple but not easy as differences make us better. So there are 8 billion people in the world, right? Imagine if the world were 8 billion people the same, like all me or all you. How ridiculously boring that would be, particularly if it was with me. So differences make us better. Differences help us in so many different ways. They help us think better if you handle it the right way, if you deal with it the right way. I love what Martin Luther King says, particularly where he says, hate cannot drive out hate. There's so much divisiveness in our world, so much diversity, that some people have leaned on hate to change the world. And that's not going to happen. That's not going to work. We have to rely on love. Only love can change what's going on in our world. So even the word sometimes, the word diversity, if you look at this puzzle, right? It's all these different individual pieces that are out there. And that's great. Again, 8 billion people, 8 billion different people in the world. That's incredible. What I like to think about, though, is inclusion. How can we bring those people together, not only to cooperate, not only to collaborate, but to partner together and change our world? So what I like to think about is, what I'd like you to do right now is to write down, if you're at a crime scene, let's say you're a private investigator, you're a person on a crime scene, okay? And the private investigator talks to you afterwards and wants to hear everything you possibly know about that person. Now, I want you to imagine, though, that you're also the criminal in this crime scene. So you saw the crime, you saw yourself commit this crime. I want you to write down everything about you that you can tell the private investigator to help him or her or the person back at the shop draw a picture of you. Now, hopefully you'll do a better better job than this young kid's drawing here of the crime scene. But I want you to write down as many factors about you that you can that would help the police officer or the sketch artist draw a picture of the criminal, which is you in this particular case. I want to do this to point out my example. So list as many things as you can. Just show it. Let's go, I guess we can go the whole body. All right. I don't want you to get in too much detail and make this a 25-minute exercise and miss what I'm talking about. So as you're doing that, I want you to think about, what about what's on the inside? What about what's on the inside? Isn't that really what people are about? When you come up to you and someone says, tell me about yourself, the first thing most people go to is their title. And that's the what you are. The who you are is what's inside of you that people can't see. At a crime scene, you can't tell about that person, about the inside of them. You can tell some things about their eye color, their hair color. Are they bald, long hair, short hair, tall? Are they tall or short? You can give some general ideas. But if you look at who we are in terms of inclusion, we're much like an iceberg. 10% of an iceberg is above the water, as you can see in this picture. Isn't that a beautiful picture? I just love the blues. 10%, and that's the part that people see. 90%, the important part, the who you are, is what's below the water level, below the line of the water. But yet 90% of the judgment we make on people is on that 10% that's above the water. So we're not really focusing on how the differences make us better, because we're focusing on what we see, just like the picture you drew of yourself, or the factors, the different skin color, hair color, whatever the case might be for the sketch artist. We need to focus on what's below the water so that those differences can make us better. Some different things that have happened in my life. When I was a college student, that's me on the left. I got my W shirt on today too, right? Wouldn't be a Todd Father presentation without having the W shirt on. But I was a student manager for the Wisconsin Badger basketball team. People who know me know that I love the Badgers. And the first African-American coach in the Big Ten was the head coach at the time when I was there. And obviously, he brought in a lot of talented players from all sorts of different backgrounds. But being a kid from Verona, Wisconsin, not even a suburb of Madison, really a community of its own out in the middle of cornfields, to be in that environment, I learned a great deal about how differences make us better. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest, some of those players were creeps and some of them were great people. And it didn't matter what I saw as the sketch, what I was going to tell the sketch artist. What mattered was inside those people. I had a similar experience when I worked for the UW-Platteville, the men's basketball program. The head coach is in the middle, Bo Ryan. Some of you who know basketball know who Bo is and the Hall of Fame coach that he is. Again, I had the opportunity there to recruit some African-American students from Chicago and bring them into Platteville. And what made it happen was that differences made us better. We got them engaged with people. We got all of our student athletes engaged with people, all the different people in the community. And that's what made life better for them and life better for us, and what opportunities we had to learn from those young men. One of those young men right now is a head basketball coach at a Division I college. They've all the players through the program have done well for themselves. More personal experience was when I was at United Way of Dane County. Leslie Ann Howard was my boss at the time. I got promoted from a director to a vice president position, so I had to hire my replacement. And Leslie, I went through the whole process, right? The typical search and screen. Well, not so typical then it was. Now it wouldn't be the same way. But anyway, and it came down to two different candidates. So Leslie and I talked about those two candidates. Thankfully, Leslie challenged me about my choices. We had a long conversations. One of the candidates looked just like me. And he was the same, really, in many ways, inside and outside. And he was the candidate that I wanted, the one that was kind of the lead candidate. And Leslie and I continued to have some conversations. The other candidate was Dora Zuniga. Dora was a strong Hispanic woman. Thankfully, Leslie challenged me and I ended up hiring Dora. And Dora and I had a conversation. Oh my gosh, that was probably a couple of years ago. I went down to Tampa to speak at an international conference, and we had a chance to get to have lunch together. We talked about this very process I'm sharing with you. It was a 3-hour lunch. We didn't eat the whole time, but it was a 3-hour lunch. Great conversation, and how we both learned from that situation, and how she learned from me, and how I learned from her. But it wouldn't have happened if I didn't realize that differences make us better. And you're probably thinking, well, why didn't you hire Dora? Well, I was afraid. Art was so much like me, it would have been simple and easy, right? But Dora brought assets and skills to our program, our fundraising program, just like all the people in our team of about 12. The young lady kind of leaning over next to Leslie is Renee Moe. Renee is currently the CEO of the United Way of Dane County in Madison. She started as a photographer. I hired her as a photographer, and she worked her way up through the organization. So differences make us better. They're going to help you. They're going to help your team as you think about how you're going to grow. I really love this quote because it talks about uncomfortable conversations. I started a group in our community shortly after the George Floyd incident, and I called it Uncomfortable Conversations. I'd heard a webinar with Simon Sinek and John Maxwell. And Simon said, I didn't know what to do after the situation happened in Minneapolis. So he started calling people, his friends that he knew, and they started having uncomfortable conversations. And that's what we need to do to make differences help us, so differences make us better, is have those uncomfortable conversations. I ended up getting my DEI certification. If you look at me, that might be a strange thing for someone like me to get, right? So differences make us better. In my faith, I mentioned my faith before. My faith is very important to me. There are 2 Toms that had a lot to do with my faith and my growth in faith. Tom Corcoran on the right, someone who helped me down this leadership journey. Now I know it's going to make Michael mad. Michael came along a little bit later, and he's been very important too. But Tom was the one who brought the John Maxwell team to me in front of me and helped me down my journey of leadership, and helped me to even have more respect for people and really see how differences do make us better. Because after all, the people in our lives, like Tom, like Leslie, like Dora, like Bo Ryan, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You need to figure out who's going to be in your inner circle. That's one of the 5 steps of the 5-step roadmap for a mindset shift. One way to help you along that road is knowing your strengths and knowing the obstacles of your style. If you've taken a DISC assessment, it gives you such an advantage in your life. And I've done so many different DISC assessments and debriefs and been able to show people individually from the inside and as they work on the outside with people, again, as an entrepreneur or in the corporate world. What it really boils down to, if you think about it, is personality. Matter of fact, I was doing a training for a company here in town. They actually manufacture wheelchairs, personalized wheelchairs. And they've got like over, I don't know, millions of different combinations they can make to make it comfortable for people who have the need of a wheelchair. But the woman said, well, what we're talking about is really basically all it is about personality. And that's exactly true. That's why we have the silos, the drama, the barriers. That's why we have challenges with diversity and inclusion, because of our personalities. If you think of the show Bar Rescue, right? If you've watched that show, this guy comes in and saves the bar, and 75 to 90% of the show is about the personalities of the people and how they didn't get along with themselves, with their team, and then obviously with their customers. So if you peel away all the organizational dimensions, you peel away the external and the internal things, it really comes down to personality that we need to focus on, our own and how we work with others. So by taking this 15-minute assessment, you can really change your life and change the life of others. It's simple, but not easy, right? A simple thing to do, but not easy. And this is a general look at what a DISC assessment tells you. I'm an I personality. I'm outgoing, I'm people-oriented. Hopefully you can tell that from the communication I've done today. And it's a great tool for getting into companies. Well, I was with one company, and one of the people, as we were going around debriefing and talking about it, started talking about how he was bullied as a young kid. And the person who was talking was in his 60s, still obviously impacted him, but how now he better understands other people, and that D personalities who are task oriented, dominant, driven aren't bullies. They're just people who are different, who have a different personality. Now, as we were talking about conflict earlier, if you like conflict, another great book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. And Patrick talks about the 5 dysfunctions. But in order to get to a trusting environment as an entrepreneur or in the workplace, you have to communicate well. Once you communicate well and you build that trust, then you can have constructive conflict and you don't need to fear the conflict. So it's a real kind of a stepping stone process. It's your decisions and not your conditions that determine your destiny, determine your trajectory, determine where you're going. We all have decisions we can make. We can make excuses, talk about people being our challenges, or we can get out of our own way, start working with people, start partnering with people, start focusing on differences making us better, and really hit that destiny for us. But again, it's our decision how we want to handle that. The last thing I want to challenge you to do, as I often do, is commit intentional acts of kindness. So do something today. Hold the door open for somebody. Call somebody you haven't called in a while. Repair a relationship. Listen to somebody and ask questions. Do things that commit intentional act of kindness. And if you do that, and the person you does that the next day, we've impacted 4 people. And those 4 people then impact 8 people. And actually, by the end of the month, we can actually hit those 8 billion people. Wouldn't that be something if that could work in our world? Just simply by committing intentional acts of kindness. So you may be broken. You may not like conflict, but there are ways to get through it. There are ways to get around it. And the UnleashU Now team is a great avenue. Hopefully you've got something out of my presentation, the ones that you've heard, the ones that you're going to hear. And that's really going to make a difference. You'll maybe jump on the team and commit intentional acts of kindness and figure out why you're here and who you really are. So I appreciate and I'm honored to be a part of this group, part of this organization, part of this movement maker virtual experience. And I hope you have a great day.